We are at 29 COPs and global emissions are still increasing. All the greenhouse gases concentrations, they're tracking on the worst case scenario. The positive is a strange positive because the COPs present one of two sort of opportunities for the media to at least cover climate change, which is hardly being done now, and so that the public can get informed. So that's helpful. If you look at the long term, they don't seem to be helpful at all.
Hello and welcome to the Climate Emergency Forum. We have a very special event today. We'll be talking about the climate conference starting in Baku in a couple of weeks, COP29. And I'm Herb Simmons, and we look forward to talking with Peter and Paul. And our discussion today will really be on the question of what's up with COP29. So basically what I wanted to start is simply a couple of brief comments. For those of you who don't know much about the venue, neither do I actually, though I plan on going in a couple of weeks along with several of the others here. Baku is in a country that is one of the countries that was in the forefront of the exploration and production of oil. So we have this paradox again this year of a country that's dominated by oil, leading an effort and a meeting and a worldwide approach that has to eliminate the use of oil and other fossil fuels in the coming decades. So it's one of the many paradoxes that comes as part of the COP process. And so what I wanted to do today is start with a very simple question, maybe not a simple answer, to both Peter and Paul. And that is, if we look back at the last 29 COPs and we ask ourselves a hypothetical question, would the world be in a different position today with regard to progress on climate change if those 29 COPs had not occurred, with the thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of people attending and the air flights all over the world and the reports and the meetings and the debates and all the rest of it? How much difference has it made? And I realize no one can give a definitive answer, but I think our viewers would appreciate your perspective. So let me start with Peter.
Thank you, Herb. I think that's a most appropriate question. We are at 29 COPs and global emissions are still increasing. I recently checked the indicators, the data, and global temperature is tracking just above the worst case scenario. All the greenhouse gases concentrations, they're tracking on the worst case scenario. So I think the big problem, I could present it as a positive for COPs and a negative for COPs. The positive is a strange positive because the COPs present one of two sort of opportunities for the media to at least cover climate change, which is hardly being done now, and so that the public can get informed. So that's helpful. But I completely agree with you that if you look at the long term, they don't seem to be helpful at all, to tell you the truth. So Simon Steele is the new chief of the UN Climate Secretariat. He took over from Patricia Espinosa, who I thought was really, really excellent. So he did his important pre-COP speech on the 17th of October. It was quite an extraordinary speech because really for the first time that I can remember, the pre-COP speech by the chief of the UN Climate Office didn't mention anything of substance. It's quite extraordinary. He mentioned decimating economies, which is good to mention, but nothing on high emitters, nothing on emissions, nothing on fossil fuels, nothing on coal, nothing on subsidies, nothing on global temperatures, nothing on atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations. So that really, really is very strange. It sort of suggests that it's sort of been preordained that nothing much is going to come out of COP29. Anyway, I hope my conclusion is wrong. Meanwhile, the other background is that I noticed a Bloomberg news item, but I couldn't find anything else on it. But it's a very important news item because Bloomberg suggested that one of the things that should be looked at in COP29 is whether China should still be treated as an Annex II so-called developing country, and sort of being treated, how can I put it, with not much expectations with an Annex II country. And the problem I see with this COP is it seems to be a big denial of reality. So that's what I see at the moment. They had the Bonn pre-COP meeting earlier in the year, in the summer, and nothing came out of it whatsoever. The countries are still deadlocked on the same old thing, which is financing from the wealthy so-called Annex I countries to the vulnerable developing countries. And that's still deadlocked. I mean, year after year after year, it's deadlocked. Meanwhile, I came across a bit of reality from Reuters. Reuters carried a very important story just last month in September, and it headlined, China has more than 1 billion tons a year of new coal mines in the pipeline. So that's really, really important. That's the reality we need to be looking at. This was a report from GEM, the Global Energy Monitor, based in the US somewhere. It's really, really good. Oh my God, they do incredible work. Go to their website, GEM, and they've got everything there on fossil fuels. And of course, fossil fuels is our reality, right? So what we can be doing is trying to get that reality, right, into the COPs and into the COP29. That would be my contribution.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate that. You've given a kind of, I wouldn't say half full, half empty, more like 90% empty and 10% full, if I could characterize your comments, maybe unfairly or not. Let me turn it over to Paul, your perspective and any response you have to Peter's comments.
Thank you. Yeah, so the pros and cons, it's important to try to put together a list and see what's going on with these COPs. So, Peter's mentioned most of the cons, and of course, fossil fuel usage of people attending these conferences has been growing. I mean, we've had some of the largest COPs in the last few years, and this year, being in Baku, Azerbaijan, it's the third year that it's in a country, city that is economically tied very closely to the fossil fuel industry. So, it was in the Middle East for the last 2 years. And, now in Baku, I mean, Baku, actually, the history of Baku and oil goes way, way back to about 1848 or so. They drilled some of the first oil wells in the world. By 1899, Baku was providing half of the oil produced in the world. So it was far before Texas. It was far before lots of other countries started developing oil. In fact, I think one of the first oil rigs is also just off the coast of Baku. There's an island that started as an oil rig, and then ships were sunk and land was put there. So they developed this sort of artificial island, if you like, with buildings and infrastructure to support. I think there's anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 people living on this little outpost in the middle of the ocean to drill oil. And also natural gas is huge, methane. But, one could argue that if those resources were, in any country of the world and discovered, they would have been developed probably the same way. I mean, that's the way humanity operates on this planet. But that doesn't mean that we can continue to operate that way and survive on this planet. So there's loads of cons, and I could go on. But some of the pros Peter's hit on, and I'll elaborate. One shouldn't really underestimate the importance of occasional face-to-face meetings with fellow people, fellow scientists, fellow activists that are working hard on climate change, trying to educate the public and get awareness out of there. So, COP is a place where We make lots of good connections with people, which helps us in our work to get the climate change messages out there. It's the only place where we would meet them in person, otherwise we wouldn't. So I started, my first COP was in 2014 in Lima, and then also Paris after that. And people that I met there, scientists I've done work with over the years, and we've had them on various shows and so on. And this is the face-to-face connections with people, I think, is the most important part. The media, Peter's mentioned, the media, the number of press releases and stuff take off for the COP. Climate change becomes much more visible on the world scene, the media scene. Not only that, but just about every NGO and group working in climate change and country put out reports on climate. Just in the last week, and it's proceeding up to the COP. It's actually during the COP. It's during press releases. Countries and NGOs, anybody working or thinking about climate releases their report. So you get swamped by information there, but it's it can be talked about, of course, long after the COP is over. To give you an example of the reports, there's a global water resources report that just came out late last week, and there's a World Meteorological Organization report on water that just came out a few days ago. Just yesterday, a bunch of prominent scientists put together a letter to the Nordic Council because there's meetings in Iceland, and they're all cautioning the world about the huge risks from the AMOC collapse and how that would completely change, Nordic countries and the UK. And we're just not prepared, and the risks are much higher than have been stated previously by the IPCC. So that's something that I really want to personally push when I attend this COP. That was just decided in the last few days. So there's very good science that comes out. People have deadlines. Let's get this report out before the COP. So there's loads of information, new information that comes out. They have some excellent science displayed there in things like the Cryosphere Pavilion, which is one of my favorite places at, any of these COPs. So there are pros that mean, it's the only global climate change meeting in town. So it has to be attended, by people in the field. There's not really as much as the emissions are to get there and so on. You have to, you can't skip them all, I think, and stay current in knowing what's going on in climate change.
Thank you, Paul. So my next question is basically, if you were in charge of COP or had an influential role, what issues or actions that are not now given enough attention at COP would you like to put higher on the agenda or on the agenda at all? And let me just, before I turn it over to you, let me give you what my answer might be. Basically, I'm involved in a group called the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, and we believe that the world needs to focus not just or primarily on emission reductions, but to add to that a much more aggressive effort to remove carbon from the atmosphere and perhaps other greenhouse gases. And thirdly, to investigate the potential of what we call directly cooling the climate. Sometimes it's called geoengineering or solar radiation management. We call those three the climate triad. I think, Paul, you call them the three-legged stool. I would like to see personally the COPs spend more time on those other two legs, not at the expense of emission reductions. Let me make that very clear. They're absolutely essential and need to be accelerated. So if I were answering my own question, that's how I would answer it. And I'm going to turn it over to Peter. And if you'd rather not get into that or whatever, maybe a secondary question is in looking at what some of the ambition is for this COP, there were three things that stood out for me, at least one or two of which you've mentioned. Setting a new global finance target, and of course, making sure it's actualized, boosting ambition for the next cycle of the nationally determined contributions, which is basically what each country commits to doing. And the third is basically enhancing the national adaptation plans that have been and are being developed. So anyway, basically, I've given you sort of a menu of however you'd like to respond, Peter and Paul, whether it's what's now missing or responding to any of those three key ambitions for the COP in 2 weeks. Peter?
So yeah, carbon dioxide removal. I'd certainly like to talk about that. And similar to COP28, I can't remember his name, but the Azerbaijan president of this COP has already made a statement that the world has to continue on with fossil fuels, that the world cannot give up fossil fuels. And the inference that the media took on that is that it's a promotion of carbon dioxide removal. Now, there's nothing wrong with promoting carbon dioxide removal, but the problem is, and it's a huge problem, is it's not happening. There's no financing, there's no resources, nothing going into carbon dioxide removal, which is absolutely ridiculous because we've known for the past 20 years that we would have to remove some carbon dioxide in order to stabilize the climate and, of course, stabilize the oceans with respect to ocean acidification. So we really need to be doing that one now in a very, very big way because, as I say, everything's going up. We're tracking the worst case scenario on everything. So we really, really have to do that one. I don't know about planetary cooling, about stratospheric management. I don't really think I can comment on that. I don't really know very much about it even, except that I do agree with the people that have been saying that the Arctic has to be cooled. I certainly agree with that because we've got boreal fires increasing in the Arctic, and that will increase, and it probably already is, the feedback emissions from the permafrost and also from the subarctic wetlands. That cannot be ignored because that's a world-ending situation. So we can't allow the feedback. I mean, we've been terrified about that for decades, but it's actually happening now. I'd like to see some truth in the science at this COP29. All I'm hearing is 1.5, 1.5, we could still do it, blah, blah, blah. So, but my final comment would be is that the chair of the IPCC, Jim Ski, did do an interview with the Telegraph in the UK, in which he said that humanity has lost the opportunity to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees C. So the chief of the IPCC has said that. Nevertheless, Baku is going to be based on this 1.5 degrees C assumption. Mm. So that's very odd. The other thing that Jim Ski said was that, yeah, I completely agree with. The world would need to make a heroic effort, he said, to limit to 2 degrees C. At the moment, we should be talking about 3 degrees C, not 1.5 degrees C. 3 degrees C is where we are being sent, and nothing has changed on that score. The AR6 said it was 3.2 degrees C. So there you have it.
Well, that's a very sobering comment, but certainly consistent with the science and the perspectives of some of our leading scientific bodies and scientists. And just to add that in my research, or at least my observation of the research and reading and synthesizing it, it appears that unlike, say, 20 years ago, where the scientific consensus seemed to be that the activation of, in many cases, irreversible tipping points might not occur until we reach 4 or 5 degrees C. The latest science, alarmingly, and I think it's tragic that so few people know this, are saying that many of these tipping points, primarily but not exclusively in the Arctic, as you point out, Peter, are likely or certainly conceivable to tip over beyond our ability to address them at temperatures below 2 degrees C. And if you put that together with the comment that you just indicated that Jim Skay made, we have a very bleak situation. And, to what degree will the folks at COP in Baku address this and recognize it, I think is a huge question. or will there still be this kind of optimistic, keep 1 point, as you say, let's keep 1.5 alive as we march on well beyond that. So with that, I'm laughing, but there's no reason for me to laugh, except sometimes maybe a laugh is a defense mechanism against crying. But with that, let me turn it over to Paul. I don't know if you want to comment at all on that or on the Arctic. I will say, and many of you probably know this, Paul has probably produced more videos on the Arctic and climate change than anybody on the planet. But you only have a couple minutes now, so go for it, Paul.
Yeah, I think gallows humor is important. Otherwise, we'll just all be crying. I mean, 1.5 is clearly dead, as James Hansen has been saying for years. We had a whole year above 1.5. It was 1.6, 1.7. So that idea is just, it's Monty Python-esque. It's just absurd. Many nations are separately declaring climate emergencies. They have over the past few years, but the UN needs to do this. They need to come out and declare a global climate emergency. They need to start acting, as do countries that declare these emergencies, as if there is an emergency, actually believe their own words, because we're not acting like there's an emergency at all. We have voluntary targets. I mean, in an emergency, think of when emergencies were declared during World War I, World War II, nations started to act differently to respond to the emergency. And they're not doing anything close to that now. So the emergency words are just empty words. We need mandatory targets. I'd like to see, if I was in charge of the UN, I would have every oil company on the planet commit to have a schedule to get off oil. So it would start with every oil company in the world. Every individual one would need to, say, have 10 or 20% of their energy production from renewables. And this should be mandated and phased in and, lead to 100% by a certain date, right? I mean, we need to mandate things and, stop trying to just say it's all the consumer, right? Because, with inflation high, with a lot of people struggling, they don't really have any agency as individuals. We need nations and legislation to have a pathway to get off fossil fuels. And the subsidies are absurd. We have all these perverse negative incentives to keep burning more and more fossil fuels. And greenhouse gases are continuing to rise at accelerating rates. And, all of the COPs since, we had the Rio Earth Summit in 92. We had the first COP1 to COP29, and things are still heading the wrong way. I mean, we could argue that, maybe CO2 levels would be 50 ppm higher right now in the atmosphere without any of these COPs and any action. But these things are all, sort of water under the bridge. I mean, here we are with another COP in 2024. What are we going to do? There's some incentives that they're talking about that actually sound interesting and novel. Like one of them is that they're talking about a climate truce. They're saying that all countries attending the COP should have a truce if they're warring 7 days before the COP starts until 7 days after the COP ends, to show that they're negotiating in good faith. And this is an interesting thing, if given the wars that are happening right now and the damage to the environment and emissions and all the rest of it from wars. So there's loads of things that we can do. I would, like Peter said, or like you said, Herb, we need also them to come straight on carbon dioxide removal techniques and solar radiation management techniques, and basically tell the public, look, we're in a real emergency here. We have to take some drastic actions in the short term to try to stabilize the climate system and keep things like the AMOC currents from collapsing, which is a huge issue, right? Because it will change the world permanently if that tipping point goes off. And scientists have identified that that's the highest risk tipping point that we're facing. And it could happen within a decade or two with business as usual. So those things need to be completely hashed out at these sort of events. Otherwise, they're just going to occur, and we'll have to just try to live with the consequences. So,
Well, thank you, Paul. Again, sobering comments, but but certainly reflective of the reality that we face. By no means do they exaggerate the dire nature of the situation we're in, but also the potential of meetings like COP to begin to shine a spotlight on these additional actions that may be taken if and when we ever get to the point of recognizing that this is, by any definition, an emergency. Unlike most emergencies, it's not a short-term emergency, it's a long-term emergency, but it is an emergency. And I just a couple of thoughts briefly about the whole concept of emergency. When the special report by the IPCC was released, I think in 2018 or 2019, on the consequences or the importance of keeping to 1.5, as we smile now that's not a reality, even so few years afterwards. They were holding a press conference from Korea, I believe, which turned out to be the middle of the night where I am here in DC in our time zone. But I got up because it was actually an opportunity to post questions in the chat. And I was shocked that whatever platform they used actually showed the number of people who were online. I mean, this was, perhaps the most important report up to its time ever produced. And there was something like 130 people, out of 8 billion who were on. But I got on early and I typed the question into the chair of the IPCC, which was, given what you have discovered, concluded in your report, isn't it time to declare a climate emergency? And interestingly, they chose questions before mine in the queue and after mine, but skipped over mine. So I don't know if that was intentional. They didn't want to put that question to the chair or what. But here we are, all these years later, we still don't have an emergency, and situations are getting worse. I just want to wrap up by thanking Paul and Peter, and by telling our viewers here, first, we want you to like and subscribe. We know many of you have and will, and we hope you'll continue to do so. But also that several of us are going to the COP, and we plan on reporting back by video, however, from the COP. So you'll hear our reports and comments and interviews with all sorts of important and interesting people and topics over the period of time from November 11th, the day it starts, until November 22nd, which is at least its official ending. Sometimes they go longer because they can't reach agreement even at the last day. So again, I thank you very much for the opportunity to hear these comments about COP. We hope you'll follow Climate Emergency Forum. We hope you'll follow closely what happens at COP, and we hope you'll make your opinions and views known to the world and whoever is listening. Thanks again.